So fresh off the heels of the Kenya Philanthropy Forum focused on tech, there is still so much more to unpack. And now we are privileged to be in conversation with someone for whom this agenda truly resonates. And we believe that their passion and insights will even shed more light on this crucial agenda. We cannot wait to hear the perspectives that they bring to the table. Let's dive right in. Thank you so much for taking your time to have this conversation with us. We are still navigating the interesting nexus between technology and philanthropy. Could you please introduce yourself, your organization, and maybe the role that you play in your organization?
Sure. Thank you for having me in this important discussion. My name is Dawita Deledese, and I am the community manager for the Kujuling project. It's being sponsored by ADESO, and ADESO has been a civil society organization for the last 30 years. And out of our lived experiences, we have entered in spaces where we're offering different solutions to which how resources can be distributed to local organizations to advance this impact. And we're so happy, that we're having this conversation with East Africa Philanthropy Network, and thanks for giving us the opportunity as well.
Amazing. In your experience, how has your organization, or rather you as an individual, tapped into AI's capabilities to foster deeper community engagements?
So in my role, I get the privilege and opportunity to interact, with the different kind of organizations globally, and I think, like you said, I think the conversation of AI, it's a bit too soon. It's a new technology that has entered our civil society sector, but it is having an impact. One of the things for me that I can say is I think there's a positive element to it, and there's some negative elements that are kind of coming out, especially when you look at text to image. Some of those images that are being generated are a bit racist, and then kind of showing the content creator itself in terms of the deep knowledge they have about the globe. So that's one element. But if you look at it on a positive aspect as well too, it is making work a bit easier. Like one of the things that we do use when we have meetings is we use Otter AI, which transcribes, which records and transcribes information. But even within that, there's always the question of privacy as well too. So for me, I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and I am glad you brought that up. And it's a conversation we need to start to keep going to having till we get a better understanding of its impact in our sector. So
you've actually touched on what was going to be my next question, that data ethics has become paramount in our connected era. And so how do you balance the robustness of AI's data analytics with the pressing need of data privacy and ethics?
That's a very difficult question to answer, But I think for me, one example that I can give is the event that happened here in Kenya. If you're aware, the World Coin, where they were collecting people irises, and they were given a certain amount of money for them to be able to do that. So because anytime I think new technology, just not in our sector, but when new technology enters, there's always either it be Facebook in the past or Google, there's always the question of whichever data is being collected, who is it benefiting? So, and I think, for us being here in the global south, we have to advocate for all the data that's collected, and especially for local organizations that are collecting names, age, dates, health information, and those kind of things. And I know in Kenya there's a new law that passed, and because of the event this happened as well, it's brought it to a highlight, But as an organization that's community-based, that is community-trusted, if you violate data and that comes out, you lose your credibility. So there's that element that we have to look at as well too. So I think, for me, like when it comes to new things that are being introduced, especially when it's having to do with technology, it's an ongoing conversation we need to have to educate ourselves, and it's an ongoing conversation we need to have to educate those that who are around us. So.
Incredible. And now, drawing from that, I believe that a real life scenario would paint a clearer picture. Could you maybe share with us a scenario where AI with its data-driven insights maybe redirected one of your projects or catalyzed change in a way that you anticipated?
So as an organization for Adesso, I don't have a specific example to give, but like I said, with the many interaction that we have with different organizations, one thing that I can share with is it has lessened the burden of the compliance issue that you have when it comes to being able to generate, a concept note, then going on to a report, as well as doing monitoring and evaluation, because it does kind of minimize it, but you still have to have a valued input in order for it to be able to generate content that you can actually use as your funding proposal. And one of the things that has kind of become common is I think most people are now kind of able to determine AI-generated content, like on social media. You actually see that. So, but for me, I think as long as we're citing it, that we have used it, it's still a technology. I mean, it's the same thing, when we had the typewriter and then the Microsoft Word and computers came, those were technology that advanced. So as long as we're using it in an ethical manner, that's one. And two, we're giving credit where credit is due. I think if it enhances our works, if it increases our productivity, and like there's a way where like it says you have to create a gender policy. So if it auto-generates a gender policy for you, then you modify it to fit your organizational needs. I think that it's just makes it much easier. So
how do you weave into this digital lattice to augment collective action?
This is one of my favorite subjects, and I think in terms of So and then one of the reasons even that I came to this conference is in the world that we live in, I think especially those of us that are born in the 80s, we started with social media like Facebook and other things, where, and in many ways they've actually caused government coups, So there's true immense power in collective voice, So our platform, for example, Kujalink, what we're trying to do is we're trying to do a dynamic mapping of organizations that are working globally, but in some areas, like we're focusing on youth-led and youth service organizations. Once you identify those organizations and you create a group within that platform and allow those civil society organizations and individual within that organization be able to interact, exchange ideas, and then share positive practices and negative practices they've experienced as well too. And one of the biggest things that we had today is I really want to use this example. All of us have dealt with restrictive funding in the funding in the philanthropy landscape. So after this conference, we do the work and we get every single civil society organization in Kenya to have kind of a memorandum saying, going forth from now on, we've identified these funding practices are harmful to our communities, they're not working, and we're not able to implement social change, and social change does not fit in a box like a log frame. It might look nice when it's written down, but when you actually get down to the community level, there's a multitude facet of issues. It's not as if you're just addressing gender, you're addressing climate, it's intertwined. So understanding that complexity in ecosystem with the collective voice, if we say going forward, we will not be receiving funds, one, if it does not meet this specific thing, this, like I said, as one person I can say those, but if it's done in a co-creative manner, and a collective voice. And in a day we have, very multiple social medias, this would break news records, So for me, I think it's not just in politics, but I think in civil society as well, too, is the voice of civil society actors and leaders need to be amplified, because even in different conferences we have, I'm so happy that we're here in Kisumu having this discussion after actually having an honest conversation with organizations that actually work with the community they represent. So it's not like, I think one of the things that I really enjoy working with that East Africa Philanthropy Footwork is not just a verbal practice, but it's an actuality lived experience that we're going through. And that's the same thing with the DESO as well too, is we have seen how bilateral funding affects us, and we're seeing even when it comes to philanthropy some of the restrictive. So we're trying to put that out, but as two organizations we have a hard time. But if this is where we're doing it collectively, which is, it's a shared experience, similar experience that we have, we actually do have the power to change the practices that we think are not impacting and benefiting our communities. So
I would listen to that over and over again. But bravo for the good work that you're doing. Now, text dynamic nature requires agility. So how does your organization ensure that your platforms remain adaptive, always echoing the evolving needs of the communities?
So we one of the things that we do is we have because we're not just advocating for system change, but we're actually practicing that on a day-to-day basis. We actually do educational webinars, and the way the format is set up is you have one or two civil society organization participating in that specific sector. That's one. Two, we get a network, which we really believe this is where it kind of relates to the group one, where it's those voices that are amplified. So for example, you can have East African Philanthropy Network. There's another organization that we work with, it's called GIG. It's a global one where they work with different civil society organizations that are around the world. Then we bring the funder element, and that is, we're trying to create a co-creative space to which where there is an exchange of ideas. Some learning, some unlearning as well too. So that way, at the end of the day, for me, I think what most important is, it's as individuals, as organizations, we might not have the solution, but we have the lived experience that we can bring into that room, and by creating this space like we've had today, we're able to kind of move toward lesson learned, and actually be able together as a collective come up with some kind of solution. So we do that, and the other thing we advocate as well too is partnerships, which we have, our partnership with you guys. We have our partnership with the Kenya Community Development Foundation. We have our partnership with TechSoup, as well as the different funders and funder networks that are in the world as well. And we're really excited, for our executive director Dagan to speak at Wings, which is a forum that's trying to change the philanthropic landscape as well too. So
amazing.
Thank you.
As a side thought, I would love to know, have there been any unforeseen revelations or challenges while embedding these collaborative tech mechanisms in your work?
So there's many of them out there. So I mean, even for us, like, this is actually an interesting thing. So you have because when it comes to trying to use tech as a way to catalyze change of philanthropic space, you have the crowd fundraising ones, which there's multiple. We don't have to say names. Even in the format that we have, there's a few other ones that are popping. So one of the things that we're trying to do is reach out to those organizations and actually start that conversation. So we're not, because at the end of the day, for me, like, there's two different approaches. There's the approach where you're trying to shine just as an organization, or are we actually working for the cause?
Okay.
So when you work for the cause, what happens is you abandon these kind of self-promoting kind of things to the back of it, and what becomes important is it's the cause that needs to be solved. So, and when you do these kind of collaboration, and we had this discussion, is where you focus on what you specialize in and you drop the other ones. So if the other organization, even if you're doing similar things, there's so much operation for collaboration. And out of that, you become one voice, and out of that voice gets amplified, which means the cause gets a bigger voice. So that's, and I think for me, like with even our executive director mother as well, where, you know, when you become a community-based organization, it's, and that's your history of it, what happens is you always work for the cause, and you forget yourself. And I think it's not just us, you know, it's what you guys do. It's what every organization that was here participating in this event does as well. And for me, like, I'm always happy to be in those rooms. It's because it's the cause that becomes first and not the organization itself. So.
Okay, I think I have studied you well enough to understand that your favorite subject is technology, but leveraging technology for resource mobilization is another favorite subtopic that I want us to touch on. Sure. So from my discussions and studies with various actors in the sector, it's evident that technology is redefining the paradigms of resource gathering and allocation. So how have you integrated tech to streamline and enhance your fundraising initiatives?
So KujiLink, as you know, for me, like, I think that's the best example that I can give is, so there's a big tech element of it where we're trying to break down the barrier between the funder and the civil society organizations, and in creating a tech infrastructure that is trying to solve the funding paradigm. That's one. And if you look at it in the second way, where we're trying to address the compliance conundrum as well too, where organizations are kind of in a unified place, are able to be dynamically mapped, or able to kind of explain the stories and areas to which that they're working on, and without giving too much information, give some kind of reference in terms of, you know, the fundings that they've had and some of the reference points. So it makes it much easier for a foundation to say, okay, these kind of the organizations that I can work with, and vice versa as well too. Give civil society organizations information on funding opportunities, you know, where specific funder works on, what areas they focus on, because one of the things when it comes to the funding landscape is funders have specific areas that they choose, and specific topics that they favor. So as part of our educational webinar and our CSO showcase as well too, so we're actually trying to we're doing a pilot where we're focusing on refugee-led, refugee service, matching it with the different global funders that are around. That's one area. And the other one is where you have youth-led youth service with climate justice focus, which for me is a really, really important topic, like even when we're saying tech and things that we have to talk about, because as we say, like Generation X and Generation Y, they're gonna be living with those consequences. So it's, I think, when it comes to technology being able, because one is in order to get funding, you have to be able to amplify your organization, the cause that you have. And I think in our current, you know, world that we're in is that there's many platforms that does that. But when it comes to our platform itself, it's created for civil society organizations. So you're getting that peer-to-peer element, as well as the ability to kind of spotlight and highlight what your organization does for different funding opportunities, specifically focused on the philanthropic space. So.
Amazing. So, still on fundraising, the digital age has presented a collection of fundraising avenues. So, are there any that resonate with your ethos or other principles as an organization? And maybe you could give examples on the same.
Yeah, one of the partnerships that we started, it was after the Zanzibar event that we had.
The 8th East Africa Philanthropy
Yes,
Conference.
exactly, the 8th one, which was pretty amazing, is we had an opportunity to Giving Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
That, for me, the reason I said that is because there's two different elements to it. There's the kind of trying to give people the opportunity to honestly, like, to fit the word philanthropy, which is giving from the heart, you know, so that kind of bringing that giving spirit element in it. There's a crowdsourcing part, but at the same time they do movement building and capacity enhancement for the different organizations that they work, because there's that. And Chenga is another one, which is, you know, it's being able to kind of, you have an organization and you use local sources to be able to raise those funds, you know, being able to advance those causes. And I think even earlier today we had this conversation. Not every organization that's seeking funds requires to have $1 million. Some organizations would be content if they raise 5,000, 2,000. So this is where, for me, like, I think as many platforms that exist, we should celebrate them, because the causes and the issues that we have are many. So as many opportunities that exist for organizations to be able to meet their funding needs, that's what we should advocate for. So,
with the vastness of the digital platforms, engendering trusts becomes critical. Okay, so how do you leverage technology to crystallize this bond of trust with your donors, showcasing the tangible impacts of their contributions?
So, I mean, I think for me, let me make sure that I understand the question correctly. So it's basically showing value for your investment from the funder's perspective.
Yes, precisely.
Know? So I think for me that's a very important thing. Like, one of the things for me, like, you hear me keep saying, I'm a big advocate when it comes to unrestricted funding. But when I say unrestricted funding, it's not where you're giving money without an impact portion of it. When you give unrestricted funding, there's a level of trust that you have reached. And as an organization, there's a level of trust you have reached in your community and with those that you work with. What happens is it gives you the flexibility to be innovative. Because at the end of the day, for me, like, I think producing reports is an easy thing. You know, like, if you hire an accountant, you know, like, you can account for everything. You can create, I mean, you can copy and paste policies that are out there, you know, in terms of what procurement is and other things. But I think that the accountability portion of it, for me, is to the community, not to the funder. The funder is a partner that goes along that road with us, but the trust element of it and that accountability portion has to be on the communities that we serve, because we report for the money spent, same as you do for any banking transaction that you have. But if your accountability is to the funder, then you should not be in this sector. The accountability is to the community that we serve. So
shifting the power.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, and so technology has made outreach global. Right. So how do you navigate that expanse, especially when channeling resources from varied geographical pockets?
So, I mean, I think, you know, in terms of being able, so so when it comes to, so that I think we kind of have to separate them out. When it comes to crowdsourcing ways, each technology that is created has to be kind of compliance with the country they operate in, and when those funds are transferred to a specific organization, there's a compliance component that it has to meet as well too. When it comes to philanthropy world itself, you can have where, you know, an organization gives money to a local re-grantor, and that re-grantor have the flexibility to re-grant in kind of in a creative ways that they want. But I think for me, like as we discussed here today, using that technology to be able to do fund mobilization in local context. So if we're trying to address, you know, issues in Nairobi, we try to do a geographical vocation where we use that resources, and vice versa in Kisumu as well. So I think for me, when it comes to technology and especially when it comes to resource mobilization, it opens many venues and many doors, you know. So we as an organization, and depending on the funding need that you have, and based on your fundraisers and those kind of things, I think there's different strategies. It's not like a cookie cutter where one thing fits all. And this is where, for me, like, I think we all have different conversations. My needs are different than yours, and this is where I think you kind of have to have a one-on-one, and that there's many experts that are out there that can kind of advise and reshape depending on where your vision and where you want to be as well too. And I think we keep having this conversation where we can't be experts in everything, but we could focus on what we're good at and enhance that and collaborate with other organizations, so that way we're serving in the community in a holistic manner. So
sorry if this feels like a job interview.
it's okay, it's fine.
But could you maybe talk to us about an instance where tech precision enabled timely and significant aid to a community? I know you have quite a number, but just give us one instance.
So I think, like you said, there's quite a few examples that we can go to discuss, but I think in this sense it kind of would be nice to kind of be general, you know. So for me, there's a point to which where you, especially when it comes to social media, where there's, you know, communities come together and they raise, you know, a decent amount of money to address a specific issue, and that issue in essence leads to some kind of local paper, then some regional, then to a national TV. That in itself invites a philanthropic organization to be able, because most philanthropic organizations are by invitation only, and that opens that door. And we've seen quite a few of that happen without mentioning specific organization names. So,
yeah, amazing. We're moving on to research.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I believe it stands as a bedrock of informed philanthropic initiatives. So how does technology enhance and deepen this foundational aspect within your organization?
So I think, you know, when it comes to Adesso and now as well as Kujalink and our other initiatives that we have, we're very data driven. And when we say data driven, we're where our communities, one, have a voice in everything that's done, as well as the impact that we do. Prior to this, I actually worked for a research institution as well too. So, and then I'm a huge advocate when it comes to data-driven policy making as well too. So, it's basically, for me, like I think, just to simplify it, all it means is what we're doing has measurable impact. You know, I think sometimes it's nice to kind of just simplify words as they are. So, if you're not having impact and you're not going in the right direction, you need to change that. So it's, for me, like, either it be in the day-to-day activities that we have as an organization, and our staff retention, that's a data-oriented thing, showing that you're actually doing a good job, you're maintaining your staff, and that's the same thing that goes with projects as well too. And if we're not putting a research element of it, because there's, so you have So there's a project that's implemented, there's successes that it has, and based on that research that we have, we can actually advocate for larger policies in terms of being able to have government involvements and other things. So it's, I think, being able to connect the dots, but in a verifiable manner. So I think
That's right.
we do it in our personal lives, you know, but I think one of the things for me, like when it comes to this sector, one big question that we have to ask is the NGOs or the civil society sector and some of the works that we're doing, have we resolved those issues? Because for me, like, I want to go a bit further, just like the private sector, where if you're not performing as an organization, then you should not be operating in those spaces. Because what's the point? I think that's where, for me, like, I think the more we move into this, because data for me is an element of community. It's what you're doing is actually producing. So, for example, if you have like a wealth creation project, you know, or cash transfer and other things. So whatever that I'm specifically doing, am I improving the community's wealth?
Oh yeah.
And that's a measurable thing. And we do have, because I think when it comes to social oriented things, there's quantifiable data and there's qualitative data as well too. So I think for me, we can look at it in both ways, but I think we have the methodology, and we have all the resources needed, being able to account for both of them. So it's in a day, like you said, when it comes to technology, where it's actually getting so much easier to be able to collect data, but if collecting it, if we're not using it to be able to direct the policies and our projects and our shifts, then like I said, then we should have some questions. So, and I think for our sector, we definitely, for me, like, we need to advocate more that we need to be much more data driven. But that data driven, not to say just this number is not working, but if it's not working, what are the things that we have to do and able to resolve that? So
this is so eye-opening. I wish we had
Thank you.
more time for this. But I have two more things for you before I let you go. I have seen the power of collaborative research, especially when facilitated through digital platforms. So how is your organization, or perhaps you, venturing into this collaborative space?
So for me, especially, I think when it comes to Kujalink, like when it comes to Adesso, I mean, basically for the last 30 years, because for me, community partnership is always number one, especially when it comes to civil society sector. So that's always has been our driving motto. So that's one. But when it comes to, I think now, in terms of organizational collaboration and those kind of things, Adesso has been at the front leads. When it comes to the 2016 Humanitarian Summit, we were one of the leading organizations in terms of the localization agenda. And there was a commitment that got where 25% of funds should go to local things. It didn't happen. Statistics shows that actually currently only 1% of funding goes to local. So that's the other data, is where we did advance the cause, but in terms of actual measurement of it, the promises that were made were not kept. So that's one thing. So I think in our collaboration with East African Philanthropy Network, with the Kenya Community Development Foundation, and like I said, with Global, we actually have another partnership as well to working with Global Giving Tuesday. We like for every single day and every interaction that we have, we always try to find an opportunity for collaboration, because the more we collaborate, like I said, we're able to advance the cause. And in our civil society sector is we have so many social issues that we're trying to save. If we just take one, for example, climate change, climate justice, there's the World Bank former employee said that the global south, they use the word developing countries, but global south countries will require $1 trillion a year just to adaptation. Not in mitigation, just to adapt to the impact of climate change. So for me, if we're not at a moment where we're advocating as an organization for collaboration, the problem is too big for a few organizations to solve. So we need to focus on collaboration. And I think this kind of goes back to the beginning of it, where I said, you know, in order for our voices to be amplified, we need to focus on collaboration and sharing data as well too, because for me, is data is where decision is made. So and then I think and then it creates a space for trust and with data protection without question, but it kind of allows us to move as a much bigger force, you know, and I think that would be my push forward. So.
All right, we move forward as a collective. Yeah,
I agree. 100%.
Okay. So in wrapping up, the ethical collection and utilization of data is not in any way negotiable. So how does the organization tread the fine line between the tech-driven research and the issue of ethics?
I mean, I think, you know, it's when it comes to ethical practices, it's not only to tech.
Yeah.
It comes to how we utilize the funds we received in the name of people that we're trying to help. So I think for me, this question of it is cross-cutting in every single thing that we do, you know, because and it's one of those things that I keep hearing and I really appreciate is trust is a commodity that is rare and is the most expensive thing to have, but it's easy to lose, you know. So and that's for me, like, if we operate within those principles, if a community is giving us trust to work with them, to co-create solutions and to enhance impact that we have to take that to a level to which it's mutual, you know. So whatever we do, we share, and I think it's not only in the digital space, but it should be in every single thing that we do as an organization, because it's a trust that's given to us, and a trust can be taken too. So that would be my summary.
Your summary is quite amazing. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for setting time to talk to us today. And most importantly, to educate our audience. So I appreciate you big time. And I'm going to request you to talk to our audience about the EAPN. What do you have to say about the East Africa Philanthropy Network? So for me, I think we've had an amazing partnership, and it's an amazing partnership that we're going to have in the future. Like I said, it's in terms of philosophy and principles, what East Africa Philanthropy Network embodies is being able to create a collective voice that can be amplified. And that would be it. And like I said, if you guys have an opportunity and you're located in East Africa, please reach out to our friends. That would be what I would say. Like you said, our doors are open. And thank you so much for watching. My name is Purity Momo. See you on the next episode.